said, welcome to this employer-focused Q&A session regarding our current round of fellowship applications. My name is Kate Atkinson. I'm head of programs at Clore Leadership, and I'm joined by a couple of other members of the Clore Leadership team. Hilary Carty, who is our chief executive, and Nicole Atkinson, who is our administrator, and we're delighted to welcome you today. So first of all, I thought I would just give you a couple of key facts and an outline of what the fellowship is really about. And then there will be some time for you to ask us any questions from an employer's perspective. So just to reiterate, today's Q&A is really from the employer perspective. So if you have prospective team members, employees who are thinking of applying to the fellowship and really wanting a little bit of guidance from an employer perspective, then that's the focus of today's Q&A session. So Nicole, would you be able to share the PowerPoint, please? Thank you. And if you can scroll to the first slide, that'd be grand. Thanks very much. So just a couple of key things about the fellowship to start us off. It's an annual development scheme. We have been running the Clore Fellowship at Clore Leadership since circa 2004. So we're entering into our 18th cohort this year as we recruit. For each round of the fellowship, we have circa 24 fellows in each cohort who we support through an elongated, bespoke and tailored piece of professional development. And we're delighted that for 2022, COVID being kind to us, of course, that we're going to be joined by international fellows in this cohort as well. And of course, if you're an employer of an international applicant, just to flag that there is a separate application process that international fellows do follow, working in partnership with our international stakeholders. So if you are employing an international fellow who's thinking of applying, please do contact us directly and we can signpost you to the relevant partner about how that scheme runs. In terms of what we're looking for experience-wise, it's around about 7 years minimum level of experience working as a leader in the cultural sector. And there are, of course, other eligibility criteria that do apply for some of the specific art form specific fellowships, or for some of the fellowships which are targeted at particular groups of leaders within the cultural sector. Welcome if you're just joining us now. I'm just walking through some of the key facts about the fellowship, and then we will open for questions from the floor at the end. Really, in fellows, we are looking in a nutshell for cultural sector leaders who have ambition, who have vision, and are really looking to take their leadership to its next level. So they're poised at that place where they're about to go to the next level of leadership. In terms of the timeline for the Clore 18, the 2022 fellowship, it runs between September 2022 and April 2023. So they are the bookend dates. Each fellowship in terms of its shape and flow is unique. Each fellow we work with to create their own development plan, which encompasses different activities depending on their individual needs. So although those are the bookend dates, there is a sense that each fellowship has its own different flow, its own different pace, and its own different activity thereon in. As I said, it's a framed programme of bespoke leadership development. So what we're meaning by that is that there are core components that all the fellows undertake. There are whole group activities that the cohort undertake as a group, but there are also activities that are unique to that individual fellow, and they are activities that they would do individually and through self-direction by themselves. And obviously, as you would expect, we're still in the midst of the COVID situation. So we do have one sight on what is happening with variants and the situation as it rolls on in the coming months. So COVID contingency is part of our planning process. And obviously, we would be reactive and responsive to whatever the restrictions or guidance is currently at the time when the fellowship's live. But just to give you a sense of how we've pivoted, we have where a fellowship's been impacted by the pandemic, we have pivoted activities to online. We have allowed a little bit of date flexibility, and we have accommodated attendance at the residential elements through a blended learning approach as well, where we've combined Zoom and face-to-face attendance. So just to give you a sense of some of the thinking, some of the activity we've previously done and how we would accommodate for that. Have the next slide, please, Nicole. So in terms of the time commitment, as you can see, it's roughly around 5 to 7 months. And as I said previously, the shape of each fellowship is unique to that fellow. So there is some flex in terms of when that timing of activity happens. In terms of the time commitment and being able to have time and space to undertake the fellowship activity, we do recommend that fellows try and at least step away from their employment, their work, for some parts of the fellowship to enable them to really focus in on their learning, to give them the space that they really need to maximise that learning, and in order to maximise the impact of the fellowship for them. There is some flexibility around employment, but obviously there are some activities which are undertaken as a whole group, and we do ask that all fellows are able to attend those. So when considering whether you're able to endorse your employee to apply to the fellowship, it's really important that as an employer you feel able, and your work circumstances mean that you're able to release that fellow to be able to commit to attend the mandatory activities and to be able to undertake activity from their own steam and in their own time within the fellowship framework. So in that sense, the support of an employing organisation is really critical to the fellow being able to maximise the impact of the experience. And it's also really important in order that the learning that the fellow is taking away, absorbing, is able to be cascaded back into an organisation and can permeate into kind of the wider working experience, culture and sort of learning of that organisation as a whole. So employer support is really key for an applicant. Have the next slide. So in terms of the framework, so this is the different component parts that a fellow would undertake with us. We have 2 residentials that they would attend with us, and they're bookended at the beginning and at the end of the fellowship period. There are also a much shorter skills-based workshop residential, which at the moment is there's a placeholder for January 2023. They would undertake a intensive whole cohort project. So that is an intensive piece of work where they're working collaboratively on a particular project, perhaps with a host organisation, or perhaps working around a kind of key theme with the whole group. They would also receive, as part of their fellowship, a 360-degree leadership profile. So as part of that, they would be expected to connect with other individuals, either within their team or their home organisations, to help them reflect on who they are as a leader, their preferences, their styles of working. We do include a secondment as part of the fellowship. So fellows are paired with a host organisation from a UK cultural sector organisation, and it's around about circa 6 weeks in length. And the idea is that they become embedded with that organisation or project, and that they're able to stretch their learning in new directions for them, to try out maybe some different ways of working, shadow different members of a new organisation, and also to really kind of take on board the learning from that experience back into their employed work. We give each fellow an individual development budget of around up to £3,500. And this is what they're able to allocate towards their fellowship learning activity. So with them, we would identify particular development needs. And as part of that budget, they're able to allocate funds towards, it might be bits of training, it could be conference attendance, it might be study visits that they want to go on to meet with, learn from other cultural sector leaders. It could be journals, it could be subscriptions, it could be books. We're quite flexible in our approach around that budget allocation, and it is specifically for that fellow to create a development plan and to plan the activity accordingly. We also, as part of the fellowship, provide focus support through either a mentor or a coach, and to to support that, we provide a budget of up to £2,000 for mentoring or coaching. So again, we would discuss with the fellow which of those two means of support is most appropriate to their needs. We would help them identify a coach. We have a long list of coaches that we've worked with and whose practice we really understand, and also a long list of mentors as well that we've worked with in previous years as well, and we would pair them accordingly. If it's a coach, the fellow would be responsible for creating their own pairing with a coach that they feel meets their needs and kind of chimes with their style of working. Important part of to mention for employers is obviously the bursary support that we provide as part of the fellowship. So if a fellow is employed, we would provide a £10,000 bursary paid to the employer, subject to receipt of evidence of payroll. But essentially this is to support the costs of backfilling any work that needs to be filled whilst the employee is stepping aside to undertake the fellowship. So that's the bursary is really there to support an organisation while their fellow is undertaking that activity. Fellows also are charged with creating a provocation piece, and this is an opportunity for them to dig deep into a piece of research around a leadership area that they're particularly interested in. It might be a written article that they write, it could be a piece that they present to camera, but it's an opportunity for them to dig deeper into a piece of something that's of interest in their leadership journey. The collaborative inquiry, this is something that it's a kind of mini project where subgroups within the cohort will tackle a meaty question that's facing cultural sector leadership at the moment. They work together to grapple with that question, to tease out some of the issues, and then they will present their findings to the rest of the fellowship cohort as part of the final residential. So that's a group activity that they would undertake at a pace that suits their particular group within the fellowship. We do also have a partnership with the Arts and Humanities Research Council. This is a long-standing partnership. We're delighted to work with them, and it does mean that through that partnership we're able to offer fellows the opportunity to apply for AHRC grant monies at the end of their fellowship period. There are 3 bites of the cherry of this, so you can effectively apply at the end of your fellowship year and then for the subsequent 2 years after that. And this is grants of up to £10,000 for that fellow to do a much deeper dive into a piece of academic research, connecting with a supervisor from a UK-based higher education institution, and to create a piece of academic research around a leadership theme. And then lastly, in terms of the framework of support that we offer, we do work individually with fellows to identify any particular access needs that they may have to support them to access all the fellowship elements. So we would support in terms of those who might have caring responsibilities. We'll also look at the needs of deaf, disabled or neurodivergent candidates as well, and plot appropriate access depending on what the nature of their needs are at different points in the fellowship. So for example, that might be around providing access workers at the residentials, note takers, captioners, signers, for example, or it might be around allocating some resource to support some childcare costs, for example. But again, this is, we allocate that and we discuss the needs with a particular fellow, and we'll allocate support as and where they need. Nicole. So a little bit about the finances from an employer's perspective. Thinking about the fellowship as a whole, so that whole framework of support and activity that goes into the fellowship, that equates to a value of circa £30,000 investment. So when you're thinking about the return to you as an organisation in terms of having a member of your team become a fellow, the monetary equivalent is of circa £30,000 of resource that is allocated to each of the fellows. And as I've already talked about earlier, £10,000 of that 30 is the employer bursary. So that's to help backfill any salary costs when your employee is stepping aside, stepping away, stepping a little bit out of their employment to be able to undertake the fellowship. We do also operate a scheme where we have some employers who opt to make a financial investment by supporting an employer-funded fellowship. So I'll talk about the funding for the fellowships in a moment, but this is a scheme where a particular employer who may be able to support it through existing funding or through professional development budgets is able to actually fund the fellowship themselves. It's really important, though, that I do say that any employer-funded fellowship, applicants still do need to apply via the usual process. So they would still need to submit an application that would go through assessment and moderation as normal, and we would be asking that applicant to come to interview. So there's no special recruitment stream for employer-funded fellowships. Nicole, next slide, please. So as I'm sure you would appreciate, the impact of the fellowship scheme is different for each and every individual who comes on the scheme, but in terms of the general types of impact that we that are reported back to us by those who undertake the fellowship, it's a significant piece of professional development. It allows a candidate to spend a really elongated period of time reflecting on their own leadership development journey, their own leadership development needs, and to be able to action some of the learning and some of the activity around that. It's obviously a scheme, there are the component blocks, but it is we do hear from a lot of that significantly employer that's fit. So you will have an employee comes energized, purpose, and being confident. Those do become part of the Clore Leadership network. So with that comes an enhanced professional network of contacts. I think it's worth noting that particularly fellows feedback to us that being part of a cohort, they find a really supportive network that they will draw upon and lean in upon at various points in their career, and they will come back to their fellow cohort to run challenges past them as sources of other networks and contacts. So it's a really robust, really strong and rich resource that they're able to draw upon. And of course, they're also able to draw upon us as a team as well. There's a sense that we are connected with our previous fellows and also our wider Clore network as well. So that's a really important resource that they're able to draw upon. And then, of course, there are obviously the skills, knowledge and experiences that they will develop along their fellowship journey. We have an established curriculum that we will follow for some of the residential elements. So it'll be some of the skills that you would expect a cultural sector leader to know and own. There'll be a lot of content thinking about themselves and how they operate as a leader, how they interact with others. But there are also more practical skills and development that they undertake around things like finance, around their understanding of cultural sector governance, around strategy, planning, and those kind of skill sets as well. So there's quite a broad impact to the fellowship scheme. And at the end, we can talk a little bit more about this if folk have questions around that. So in terms of the 2022 fellowships, through funding through our really valued sector partners and also our kind of core funders, Arts Council, Esme Fairbairn and the Claude Duffield Foundation, we're able to offer a range of different funded fellowships. So these are fellowships where they are fully funded already. So there is no cost implication to the fellow or to the employing organisation other than the commitment to allow that employee to attend. We're able to allow applicants to apply for up to 2 fellowships. So that means when they put their application into us, they can indicate which of the fellowships they are interested in. And we would be looking for them to be able to make a case for why they're eligible to those 2 specific fellowships. So to walk through those that we have on offer this year. We have funding to be able to offer what we call the Transform Fellowship. So this was put in place in recognition that there are gaps, there are underrepresented groups within cultural sector leadership. So we're particularly interested in hearing from applicants who are deaf, disabled, neurodivergent, and also from applicants who are Black, Asian and ethnically diverse. So really trying to address some of the gaps in the current leadership makeup. The Duffield Fellowship, this is targeted at applicants who are in medium to large scale organisations, so recognising a specific need there. The Accelerate Fellowship with an E, this is targeted at applicants who are earlier on in their leadership journey, who are perhaps exceptional candidates who much earlier in that journey would benefit from some real significant input into their professional development. We do have some art form specific fellowships. Again, these are funded by our sector partners. So the reason why we offer these specific art form targeted fellowships and perhaps not others is quite simply because of the funding that we have in place and that we're able to put in to support them. So this year we have fellowships for the dance sector, for heritage, for visual arts and theatre. And again, I think one thing just to sort of tease out of this is the benefit that the fellows report back to us of being in a cohort which has that mixed representation of art form, different perspectives, different learning that is enabled to be shared across the cohort from different ways of working and different art form practices. We have a Creative Scotland funded fellowship this year. So that is for candidates who are living and working in a Creative Scotland supported art form area. And we do also have 2 Arts Council Ireland fellowships as well. So again, for candidates who are working within that area geographically. We do offer a National Trust Fellowship. So this is a targeted scheme for employees of the National Trust, and the National Trust are involved in supporting applicants from their employee base to apply to that particular fellowship. And then, as I've already touched upon a little bit already, the self or employer funded fellowship is a scheme where an organisation or perhaps even an individual who already has resource in place to be able to self-support a fellowship is able to do so. But again, just to reiterate, the application process for those and each and every one of these fellowships is exactly the same. Candidates need to apply, they need to, they undergo assessment, moderation, and then they would need, if shortlisted, would need to attend interview. Thanks, Nicole. Can I have the next one? So again, we can talk a little further about this at the end, but in terms of broadly speaking, what we are looking for in fellowship candidates is a clear commitment and passion to make an impact in the cultural sector and beyond. When we're talking about leaders and fellows as leaders, we're not necessarily talking about folk who have line management responsibilities who might be in a hierarchy within an organisation. We are really interested in those who have the capabilities, the potential, commitment and passion to be making a change, to be making an impact in the cultural sector and beyond. We're also looking for some track record or at least some potential for cultural sector leadership or change making. So really about evidence of them being in a leadership role or a leadership place in terms of a project if they're involved in change making in a project by project basis. The fellowship is very much a self-directed programme. Fellows need to take responsibility for directing and driving their own learning, particularly around their own development activity. So we are really looking for candidates who are motivated to be able to do that and are really driven in that respect. We're also looking for candidates who are curious, who are interested in the world around them. They're open and they've got a real hankering to learn about themselves and the rest of the cultural sector and beyond. So there's definitely a sense that we are looking for people who want to ferret out solutions, find new ways, who are curious about what's going on. And as I've said already, we are aware that there are gaps, there are underrepresented groups within cultural sector leadership. So we are particularly keen to hear from and to receive more applications from Black, Asian and ethnically diverse candidates, and for deaf, disabled and neurodivergent candidates as well. Can I have the next slide, Nicole? So, Hilary, perhaps I might hand over to you at this point, as somebody who's kind of worked with the programme. Maybe you just introduce yourself as well, just to give a sense of some top tips, things that we've spotted as top tips from various fellowship rounds.
Thank you. First of all, I have to apologise if you're hearing the digging in the background, but having been stalled with some work that we're having done over Christmas with COVID and all of those things, I daren't ask anyone to delay by a day, so do forgive me. But in terms of those top tips, I think it really is important to look at the nomination. That nomination is completely critical because it enforces what the applicant is saying in their proposal, and the questions are more than kind of tell us if this person is good or not. We're really trying to get at the heart of their skills and expertise. If you look at the Clore Leadership application form, it's actually very reflective. One of the things that we see is that individuals can sometimes leave it until the last minute and then get tripped up by needing a bit of time to really think through the questions that we ask, which are about their experiences of leading and their ambitions towards leading. So what we're looking for are people who are really able to reflect on what's happening. So one of the questions for you to consider is, are the candidates really willing and able to reflect? Not everyone's willing to do that. Sometimes we can see that people are hesitant in terms of sharing their thoughts on leadership development, and that's an important one for us. It is very much a self-directed program. It's not taught for 7 months. There are sections of it that are mandatory and that are taught. But again, we're looking for individuals with drive and self-motivation who, following the stimulus that we will give them in that first residential, will go, right, okay, this is the strand that I really want to take forward, or this is a conversation that would be helpful for me to just really unpick what it is that I'm hoping to do. So are the individuals really motivated to be part of determining their future? If you're thinking that someone needs some leadership learning, then they might be better suited to one of our courses or a short form program. The fellowship really needs someone who's wanting to engage in developing their own learning. And one of the most critical areas for us is they must be ready for a step change. They must be really ready to go, this is the time for me to make a difference in the sector, for my region, for my community, for my artistic practice, but it's about wanting to shift from where we are to where we could be. So if you put all of those things together, you're looking for someone who's really ready to move things forward. And that won't necessarily be everyone who's ready for some leadership development within your organisation. So a key thing to think about is this someone who needs some leadership training, or is this someone who really needs that next propelling move to make a difference, whether in your organisation, in the wider sector, with their artistic practice, that sort of thing. Thank you for bearing with me with the noise.
Thanks, Hilary. Nicole, if we could just go to the last slide and So in terms of the application process, as I said before, it's the same for every applicant, regardless of what fellowship they're applying to or if it's an employer-funded fellowship. So the first step is that they register for an account online on the Clore Leadership website. And then that will enable them to access our application portal. And at the moment we're open, and we'll be closing for this round of fellowships on the 24th of February at noon. And I'm afraid we're not able to accept late applications to that particular round. They will be asked as part of the application to provide details of a nominator. As Hilary's already said, this is a really critical part of the application. It is assessed and it enables us to get a real insight as to the nominator's understanding of the candidate and to help us better understand from a third party perspective the potential, that step change potential that an applicant has. In the case of the fellowship, we also ask for referees as well. And if they are employed, we do ask them to include a referee who is from their employing organisation. That's to help us get a sense that there is employer buy-in to this application to the fellowship, because we will need to ensure that the candidate does have your support as their employer to be able to apply and to undertake the fellowship and have that time away to undertake it. For fellowship, there is also a 2-minute video submission question that we ask candidates to submit. We're not looking for, you know, a really polished to camera piece. We're really interested in hearing their voice coming through about what they have to say about their leadership and the change they want to make. So when, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, multi-camera setup and big swanky mics. It can be quite simply filmed on a phone or whatever. We're not looking for polished films, but we're really interested in what they've got to say about themselves there. So candidates will pull all that together. They will complete and submit their application, and then, as I've said before, the closing date is the 24th of February. Please, particular plea in terms of the nomination, applicants do need to get on to identifying a nominator good and early. We're aware that where folk are particularly busy, it can be a last minute scramble to get the nomination in, but it is a really critical part of that application. So starting that good and early is definitely a top tip as well. Then following on from that, all applications are assessed. We have a pool of assessors who will review all the applications. They are double assessed and they are blind assessed. And then that the different scores and comments are wrapped into one consideration, and we'll have a moderation of all applicants, which allows us to cross-check for any anomalies as well. Following on from that, candidates, shortlisted candidates will be invited for interview. The interviews are taking place online via Zoom through late April and May this year. Following on from that process, decisions are anticipated in late May 2022, with, as I said before, a start date for the fellowship in September 2022. Particularly if you have employees who've got access needs, who may need to make an application in an alternative format or may need to discuss some adjustments, we're more than happy to talk individually with candidates about that and how we can meet their needs. Similarly, if there's a nominator who needs support or to make the nomination in an alternative format, we're absolutely happy to have that discussion and make any adjustments. We do have British Sign Language versions of the application guidance and the fellowship information on the website as well. So that's already there if any of your employees or yourselves need to access that. I think that's it from us talking at you. So now is the opportunity, if you've got questions for us and want to find out anything else, you're able to pop them in the chat, and then Hilary and I will endeavour to answer them and give you some more information. Julie is asking, how competitive is it? What's the average number of applications? I've been in post since March 2020, so I've only lived through one application round, but just for reference, last time around we had 170 applications for the Clore 17 fellowship, so it's extremely competitive. It's a very well-known scheme, it's very well regarded, so we do get a large number of applications year on year. Yeah, so it's extremely competitive. Hilary, do you have any insights from the years pre-me? Is that a normal kind of volume?
Yeah, the 170 to 200 is about what we would expect. Some fellowships are hugely competitive. We can have between 6 and 10 applicants per fellowship for some of them. So it's really worth just considering what 2 fellowships, you know, your candidates would be going for.
Jenny's asking, are there any adjustments that can be made for part-time workers? I think the simple answer is that we would liaise individually with that particular fellow, and I think there's also a conversation between the fellow and the employing organisation. to find, you know, a flow and a pace that's going to work. Just for a couple of examples, we have had fellows who've completely stepped away from their work situation, their work context for a period. We've also had fellows who've kind of done a little bit of a half in, half out. But obviously we do need to ensure that they're able to attend for the mandatory activities, that they are there to be able to be with the rest of their cohort for those whole group activities. So there's kind of different ways of doing it depending on circumstance, and it is very much a negotiation with the fellow and also with the fellow with their employing organisation. It's important to say we wouldn't normally get involved in the negotiation with an employing organisation. That would be for the employee and the employer to kind of to thrash out the final kind of flow and pace and how that would work practically. Julie is asking whether do organisations sometimes put forward more than one person? Yes, we do get multiple applications from different organisations. I would say that it does mean though that if you're aware of that, you are pitting fellow applicants against fellow applicants. I don't think the reality of the situation would be likely that we would have more than one fellow accepted from an employing organisation. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Hilary, but I think that the likelihood we would need to go with the strongest candidate. And obviously you're in the mix with all the other applicants who've applied in that particular round as well.
Yes, it's I mean, putting forward different candidates from different organisations, if you're one of the large organisations, then that's almost inevitable. But what we would encourage is that you could advise them to really think about whether this is the time, whether this is the right activity for them. Once they do come in, then they are assessed alongside everyone else. So the key thing is to just make sure that pre-application, as it were, you give them whatever advice you can about really looking at the criteria, really looking at whether or not this is the moment and this is the program that's right for them.
We've also got a question from Julie here about secondments and the process by which we pair fellows with secondments. The simple answer is that we look at the secondment in the round of the fellows development plan as a whole. So there isn't kind of one prescriptive way that we would say, yes, you know, if you're in Scotland, we'll pair you with somebody in Scotland or something. We are really keen to get fellows to stretch and learn in different ways. So it might be that we are looking to pair them with an organisation that's working in a very different art form area. It might be that we're looking to pair them, you know, somewhere geographically that's going to put them out of their usual kind of professional kind of sphere. So there isn't kind of one hard and fast rule on this. We would also be interested in the fellows' preferences about, you know, what kind of secondment they would like. So we would give fellows a list of the host organisations and ask them for a sort of first, second and third choice. We do get sometimes some secondment opportunities that are kind of, you know, lots of fellows are really keen on. So we will have to look at it in the round with the fellow, but also in the round with the cohort. And in terms of secondment hosts, there's a kind of variety. We've got some organisations that we've worked with regularly, and we know that they've supported some really interesting secondment hosts. We also have proactively reached out to new hosts as well, and we have on occasion where a fellow's been interested, you know, particularly interested in working with an organisation, again, that is sitting outside of their usual area of practice or sitting outside of their comfort zone, if you like. We will make proactive approaches to a host organisation to suss out if that's a possibility. So I'm giving you a bit of a vague answer there, but I think it's because there isn't kind of one hard and fast rule. There is a list. We will consider new possibilities, but it's very much considered in the round of that development plan for that fellow, and also the overall cohort as well, and kind of the mix.
There's a question about how we identify secondment hosts. And again, what we try to do is to look at what do we have on offer in the mix. Do we have opportunities in local authorities? Do we have opportunities in small organisations, large organisations? Have we got things in theatre and museums and galleries, heritage? So we try to sort of say, have we got enough breadth to create a dynamic offer. And it starts there. There are hosts that we've worked with over the past years, and we would go back to those, but we're also keen to get new hosts in as well. So if any of the organizations here would like to consider a secondment, please do let us know. We simply ask you to just fill out, you know, what would the secondment consist of, who would they be line managed by or reporting to, and the length, that sort of stuff. So there's a small sort of questionnaire that we ask you to fill out, but we're always looking for new opportunities, and size and scale, we want as much variety as possible. So to make it interesting and to be able to really say to the fellows, this is the area that you've got expertise in, try this. Because what we find is when you go outside of your known professional experience, you then have to start to really understand what do you need in terms of your leadership development and leadership practice, and you separate out your expertise from your potential in terms of leading.
You're welcome, Nicholas. I can't see any further questions at this stage. So, and the opportunity is very much there if anybody does have any more to add them now. Otherwise, we will draw the session to a close. But if there are questions, just to invite you, if there are questions following on from this that bubble up to the surface and you think, oh, I wish I'd asked that, please do email them over to us, the fellowships at cloreleadership.org email address, and we'd be more than happy to answer them retrospectively, or you can reach out to a member of the team on the phone as well. But thank you very, very much for coming along today. I do hope that you will have employees that you think, oh, this just sounds like just the right opportunity for them, or it might be conversely, you think, maybe not this moment in time, but maybe later on, or another member of the team. So thank you very much for coming along. Thank you for putting your questions in the chat. It's been lovely to see you on Zoom, and thank you very much for coming.